We don't take firearms away from police officers. You know, there should be some means for these people to defend themselves.
Democratic presidential candidate Jim Webb on ABC's This Week calling for military recruiters to be armed in the wake of last week's shooting at 2 military facilities in Tennessee that resulted in the killing of 4 Marines. But the Army Chief of Staff, General Ray Odierno, says arming troops in those offices might cause more problems than it could solve. For more on this, let's welcome in 2 guests from Newsmax Washington. First, my old colleague on Capitol Hill, the former chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, Pete Hoekstra. Also with us, retired U.S. Army Colonel Patrick Murray. Patrick's the author of the new book, Government is the Problem. Colonel, first to you, where do you come down on this? General Odierno says no, we shouldn't arm those recruiters. What do you think?
JD, first, my thoughts and prayers are out to the 4 Marines and the sailor who lost their lives, to their families. You know, you expect this sometimes, unfortunately, in Iraq and Afghanistan, but not in a strip mall in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And yes, we need to provide basic force protection. Barack Obama loves to talk about the fact that he has a telephone and a pen. With a stroke of his pen, he could change this Clinton-era policy so that we can provide basic force protection for our troops who are out serving their country in our communities in the United States of America.
Pete Hoekstra, your take on this, it's hard for me to believe it's a controversy in the wake of what happened last week, but your take on what should happen with military folks armed to protect themselves domestically.
Well, I think, you know, talking about whether we should arm recruiters and those types of things, we can move past that very, very quickly. Arm them, provide them with the means to protect themselves. But more importantly, it's time for this president to recognize that there is a real threat from radical Islam and to start articulating that threat and be a forceful voice against fighting radical jihadists, whether it is the people that are perpetrating these acts here in the United States or whether it is the folks in Northern Africa or the folks in the Middle East or any other part of the world. This president has always shied away from identifying the threat and confronting it. It's time for him to acknowledge the threat and fight it at all levels.
Well, 6 states have already moved to arm those posted at National Guard offices, including Republican presidential candidate Bobby Jindal. Pete, do you expect if the president continues to, quote, study the issue, that more states will follow suit?
No, I think so. I think what you're going to see is that states and local communities are going to recognize that this threat is real. They are the first line of defense in this kind of a threat to the United States, and they will take the actions to protect the people that are in their community. They live next door to these folks, and they know that these people are the targets.
Patrick Murray, the Defense Secretary, Ash Carter, has ordered the military to study this and come up with recommendations. Do you fear paralysis by analysis in this instance?
It's already there, JD. Pete is exactly right. That's why these state governors are stepping up, because our federal government, in one capacity that they need to be present, they're AWOL. It's negligent, and that's why you're seeing the states take charge when there's a vacuum from the federal government.
Well, let's turn to the gunman. Now, we're still assembling facts on him, trying to gather intelligence after the fact. Pete, does the fact this guy was able to do this in Chattanooga, does that rank as an intelligence failure?
No, I don't think so. I think what it does recognize, though, JD, is that this is an overall strategic failure. It's going to be hard to catch each and every one of these individuals before they carry out these attacks, especially when you don't acknowledge that the threat is really out there. We're spending more time trying to determine whether this was a threat or whether this attack was radical jihadism or whatever, and we're spending the time to define and describe the attack rather than to get the information, recognize the threat, and say, this is how we stop it in the future. We're trying to make this a politically correct type of a process. This is a national security issue. It needs to be treated as such, and we need to start to identify it and stop worrying about the semantics.
Patrick Murray, you get the final word. We have about 25 seconds for it.
This is how ISIS works, JD. There's no application to fill out to become a member of ISIS. They speak to disaffected youth, just like Muhammad Abdul Aziz, and they give him a message, and he reacted to it, and it's going to happen again. And so we need to get ahead of this and deal with ISIS on their terms, which is their social networking terms. And Pete's also right. We need to name the enemy, which is radical Islam.
Gentlemen, we appreciate your comments. Thanks very much for your time. Well, you heard what Patrick and Pete had to say. What do you have to say? Here's how you can get in touch with us. Email, Facebook, Twitter, or our website, newsmaxtv.com/comments. Stay tuned.